I was born in Grand Falls, Windsor, but I grew up in Bishops Falls, Newfoundland. And we're celebrating 100 years this year.
Are you really?
And you're more than welcome to come down.
When's the celebration?
It's throughout the year, but
Okay.
the big stuff is going on this summer in Bishops Falls. So I'm looking forward to it, actually. And I'm volunteering. I'm on a committee now, so
For
I
what?
get to do something outside of politics. So where I'm volunteering on a committee to help organize a big sporting event.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
What sporting event?
Field ball. Do you know what field ball is?
You know what? I have to admit I don't.
It's a sport that we only play. Like it was a sport that my little town of 3 or 4,000 people.
And that's how big your town is?
That's how big it is.
Okay.
And we were the only ones that played this game where you get a ball and a paddle and you try to put it in the net. And because we're the only ones that played it, we're organizing a tournament called the World Cup of Field Ball.
That's appropriate.
It is. I mean, if we win, we're the world champions. So.
Are you literally the only people who play this game? Like there?
We like to think so.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll get calls from some other part of the world that probably say, well, actually, we played that too, and we should be world champions. And we'll have to say, well, actually, no, you're not.
Yeah, because you didn't have the foresight to organize this
You
tournament.
have to come to Bishops Falls to play us.
Would you make it a yearly tournament if you did actually
We
find
hope
someone
so.
in Sri Lanka who also plays?
Well, exactly. We hope so. Like, if anybody else in the world, you can call us. Go on just Google Bishops Falls, Newfoundland, and let us know.
Nice. Now, how did you get involved in this committee? Are you a field ball player yourself?
Well, we grew up playing this little game, and it was never organized. So I wanted to do something outside of politics. You know, just something that wasn't so intense with the political life. And I decided, well, why don't I do this? And here we are celebrating 100 years, and a couple friends of mine and I, and 4 or 5 people that I grew up with. So it's one of those things. It's nice to volunteer in your own. It's one of the greatest things you can ever do is volunteer in your own community.
Why do you say so?
Because it's just a satisfaction of seeing your community that much better after you're done.
Right.
And, you know, I've always lived by the adage that it takes a community to raise children, which I believe is, I know Hillary Clinton made it famous, but I believe it was said by someone else. But it's so true, because it does take that whole village to raise a child, but the village can only be as good as what the people make it to be as a collective. So, and that can only come about if you work in the community, if you help raise money to build a facility that's used by all.
Right.
And it's a great experience. And I haven't done it in a while, and I'm doing it now, and it's that sense of home that it's a labor of love, and I just love it. And for anyone, no matter how big the community is, I mean, some people have small communities within Toronto or Montreal.
Right, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I think they should get involved.
Did you play field ball because Bishops Falls was too small to have a hockey rink? Or
No,
was it just a
actually.
pure interest that...
No, to tell you the truth, we had a hockey rink, and
Okay.
we had a baseball, softball
Yeah.
on it, but there was that period in between where there was nothing going on. and we're,
You mean like between 3 and 4? Or
well, no, the period between, like, at the end of April,
Okay.
the time of the year. So
Yeah.
in April till June or
Right.
July. So there's a month of April and May and then June, and we're going, well, what are we going to do? So
Sure.
idle hands, you don't want to be in a small town. You don't want to be up to no good.
What was it like growing up in a small town?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It's I wouldn't trade it in for anything. I mean, I've lived in the cities. I've lived in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. So, and that's a great experience in and of itself. There's so much you're exposed to.
Right.
But the small town there is such a sense of belonging, and there's such a sense of self that a lot of people don't quite understand. I mean, we're in a world now in our country, about 80% of the people live in urban areas. So it's a way of life that's, I won't say diminished, that's not a nice word, but it's a lot less frequent now than what it used to be.
And it's incredible when you consider just how vast our geography is.
Oh, absolutely.
That if that
Yeah.
percentage of people are living in major urban centers,
Mm-hmm.
then you've got 20% of the rest living in this enormous country.
Yeah. And I find that the biggest, one of the greatest connections of rural living across this country, you take someone who grew up who, say, can't speak a word of English, is francophone, and grew up in St. Louis de Haha, you know? And I mean, their life growing up in small town Quebec was no different than me growing up in small town Newfoundland. You know, we played hockey on the pond, and played road hockey in the afternoon, and then on Saturday night we watched Hockey Night in Canada, or Le Soirée du Hockey.
No, it's right.
So it's unique, and it builds into your character to a point where you have such a great sense of community, and that's really essential.
Were you from a big family?
Well, there were yes and no.
Okay.
People ask me, "Were you an only child?" I don't know when they ask me what that is, what that connotates. What are they trying to say? No, I take it with grace.
In a positive way.
Absolutely,
Yes.
but. My sisters and brother, my sisters were 19, 18, 16, and my brother was 14 when I was born.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so to say I was the baby was an understatement.
So, would you be referred to as a surprise? A pleasant surprise?
Well, I hope so. I'm not quite sure.
Ask your parents if was
well, I'm sure if my father's watching this program now, he's probably thinking, yeah, sure he was.
A big one.
Yeah, so, but it's different, because I had sisters and brother, but I grew up as an only child, really.
And were they around at all growing up? I mean,
absolutely.
They were, okay.
Yeah,
so they had some influence on you.
Yeah, I have a nephew who's only 2 years younger than I am. I have a niece who's a teacher in...
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I have a niece who's a teacher in northern Quebec, and I love her dearly, and I grew up with her as like a kindred spirit sort of thing, very close, even though we were uncle and niece.
How interesting is that? You know, that's actually not a bad way of having a family, because as a parent, you've got built-in babysitters, right?
Well,
there.
I certainly do. And to say I was spoiled as a little child was, I mean, when you've got 3 older sisters between the ages of 19 and 16, I mean, they taught me how to dance because I was like their little
willing or not.
Willing or not, yeah.
Yeah.
They pampered me, because I mean, as a novelty item in
Sure.
But the only drawback was, as time went on, when I got to 7 and 8 years old, they moved out, so I was kind of only child.
Did you feel it when they had moved out? Did you feel lonely? Or was it just kind of,
Yeah, I adapted.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, they were always around, so
Sure.
they just lived down the street, so it wasn't that bad. But again, that's the great thing about Bishop's Falls. It was just this sense of community that we had. We were all family. I mean, my neighbors spent a lot of time in our house, and it was just that way. It's small town Newfoundland.
Right.
It's one big family.
Now, when you reached the end of high school, did you know what you wanted to do? Did you know you wanted to?
Well, I think it says in my yearbook in high school that it's either a prominent businessman or politician.
Does it really?
Yeah, so the irony was I became a TV weatherman to start with. So, I think I knew I was coming this way. And
you did, eh?
Yeah, well,
at what age?
I wanted to go. I was 12 years old, and I wanted to be the member of parliament. Not prime minister or anything, but member of parliament
now,
from my area.
Why? Did you have a local MP who was really interesting, or did you just think it was a neat job? Like what?
Well, I grew up in the era of George Baker, Senator George Baker. So to say it was interesting is a mild understatement. But George is the best, and he was really good. I think my earliest recollection was I was only 4 or 5 years old, and my uncle ran in the federal election for Grand Falls, Labrador.
Okay.
And I was sort of, even though I was a young kid, I was there with my placard, and the irony of it was he was running for the Stanfield, the Progressive Conservatives.
Yeah.
So I was standing with my little sign going, I had no idea what was going on, but it just looked like so much fun. This is really fun. And I think 2 or 3 years later, I think the earliest experience I had watching or getting involved in politics was my father and I were sitting down in '76, I think it was, and my father said to me, he said, come here, I want you to watch this. And he said, see that it was a leadership convention going on. And I looked at it, and he said, my father said, you watch. He said, see that guy there? Joe Clark, our next prime minister. You watch, he's going to win this.
Gosh, we should have had your dad in Ottawa.
Well, there you go. My dad was a big fan, so
and you come from good stock.
There you go. And to this day he is, so
even better.
Yeah, and he still gets out for me, even though I'm a federal liberal.
Yeah, really?
Well, he's become liberal since then, but
yeah, of course.
He was it was one of my earliest memories, and he told me, he said, they don't think he's going to win, but I think he is.
Now, tell me, we're a non-political show, but if you were first stumping for the Progressive Conservatives as a coerced 7-year-old, how did you end up running as a Liberal?
Well, I'll be quite
And
honest
did your
with you.
family just have a hernia, or was it fine with them?
That's a good way of putting it. I think in my, my mother was actually quite a devout progressive conservative. And I've had people say to me, when I won in 2004 as a federal Liberal, they say, would your mom have voted for you? And I said,
Of course
yeah,
she would have. She's your mother.
Well, this is it. I said, yeah, but I don't know. I mean, my mother was devout, if anything. So
Yeah, but-
I know, I joke about it, but
Yeah.
I became a federal Liberal when I moved to Ontario. I know you're not a political show, so I'll leave it at this by saying that when the banner lost the progressive conservative, I
Right.
became a federal Liberal.
Isn't that interesting?
And that's the best way I can describe it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you knew that you had a political interest, and yet you didn't go into politics right away. I mean, you did work as a journalist, and as you said, you were a decade. Were you not at the Weather Network? And
Yeah, 10 years at the Weather Network.
Yeah.
I got into journalism. I worked a little bit freelance with CBC and private radio back home
Right.
In Newfoundland. And I got involved in journalism when I was involved in youth politics because I thought that would be a way to go. So I did that, and then I got involved in politics again in '95 when I campaigned for the no side in the Quebec referendum because I
right.
lived in Montreal.
Oh,
so
did you
I
back
was.
when? What a neat place to live then.
Well, yeah, it was quite an experience. I got to say that I voted in the referendum of '95.
Wow.
Little guy from Newfoundland.
Yeah.
And so I did, and I got out of journalism, became a TV weatherman.
Why?
It just pushed me in that direction. It gave me freedom to do other things. It's not intense as journalism is. TV weather is, I've always said, to anybody out there aspiring to get into television and they want to be a journalist or a host or whatever it is, acting.
Yeah.
If you can do TV weather,
Yeah.
you can do anything.
It's interesting you should say that. One of my close friends has just taken on a role as the morning weather person for a local channel. And she had to basically go to, full training to figure out how to work everything. And I said to her, you're going to be the most watched person in the entire city because everyone wants to know the weather. We
That's
live
true,
in Canada.
Yeah.
I mean, and you guys must have had incredible ratings. You were saying you were on the morning show, right?
Yeah, I was on the morning show Nationals, and it was from Eastern time. It was 5 to 9, so I'd have to get up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning every morning to go to work.
I can't imagine.
It was in January that becomes particularly harsh.
Was it depressing ever? I mean, you're working on a lack of sleep, I've got to imagine.
Yeah, it did many times. I mean, but after a while, you've just become so accustomed to it that it's you don't think about it. You just get up and do it. And when I got in politics, I was able to get away from those strange hours. But at the same time, it was intense because politics is a 24/7 sort of, which was new for me.
Right. What did you like about doing the weather?
The personal contact, even though it's not in front of you, it's there. Television is a great place to be working. I mean, the dynamics of it are. I mean, I don't know of it now because now you've got
Right.
digital television, and it's like a whole new world. We're on
Very
the cusp
much.
of something completely different, where you don't tune in at 9 o'clock every night to watch your favorite show. You download it.
Yeah.
And
Watch it whenever it suits you.
exactly. And now weather is becoming that same sort of thing. But I enjoyed it because it was a young company. I enjoyed the people that I worked with. Even now, I see some of the familiar faces there when I watch the Weather Network, and it wasn't really a pressure cooker of an organization to work for like some of the big newsrooms would be, and it brought a little bit of that family community atmosphere at the Pelmorex or the
Right.
Weather Network. And it was a good place to work. I enjoyed it. Like I said, 10 years is a long time
It's
to be
a
in one
really
place.
long time.
In broadcasting, it is.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, and I enjoyed it.